Coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
From what I gather, Russia is in a better position than it was before. I mean, we're talking about the idea that, well, we're not going to let McDonald's and Starbucks and, whatever sell in Russia. But we're talking about a country that 30 years ago, had no consumer products.
Right.
Within living memory, people were boiling nettles to drink tea. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
This is a country that they can eat rock soup.
I mean, you listen to the way Navalny was talking, from Siberia. He was making these dark jokes about it's what is you Americans? You're going to come in and teach me how to do a color revolution. It's because that's the Russia. I mean, the whole Russian attitude is basically we will just suffer harder than you. Hello, and welcome once again to the Roundtable, your weekly publishers and editors podcast here at The American Mind. I'm your host, Spencer Klavan, features editor of The American Mind and associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books. It's great to be back. Very grateful to Seth for stepping in while I was away in Cambodia. But happy to be back, and in fact, joined just today by Seth, another one of our two-hander episodes. Seth Barron, managing editor. Seth, good to see you.
Hey, it's good to see you, Spencer. I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, it's really nice to be back, and I'm gradually learning how to live on American time again. It's exactly 12 hours ahead or behind, so it's a pretty trippy time difference, but it's good. Well, shall we dive in? There's a lot of just juicy stuff on the table today, but we are going to start, I think, with Russia. Russia all the time. Yeah. I think we just gotta, it's actually kind of hard to know where to start. And maybe you can help me with unpacking this stuff. Probably the big news item recently is the death of Alexei Navalny, who was the major opposition figure in Russia, the only real remaining contender against Putin, had launched several campaigns against him himself, but also was the leader of kind of an opposition group that would sponsor other candidates in sort of minor and major locales. He's been in prison for some time, repeatedly poisoned. Now he's died. The details of this sort of thing are always hard to come by, but basically it seems like he has died as a result of Putin. Whether Putin, I mean, it's not like Putin came into his cell and strangled him in Siberia, but it's Putin's poisonings that have ended up with this consequence. So we can effectively say Putin killed his last major political opponent, which is not particularly, to me, surprising or out of character, but has been, I think, sobering for a lot of people. And Biden made first a sort of distracted and vague statement that this was very bad. He had promised sanctions I think it was about 3 years ago. He promised sanctions if this happened. And now that it has, he's saying, well, but we've already done all these sanctions because of the Ukraine war since then. All the same, it seems like he's going to announce a big new sanctions package on Friday. So that is kind of the immediate context for the return of Russiagate, and kind of Russiagate everywhere. I get the impression that both Republicans and Democrats are kind of living in a John Le Carré novel. There's the underlying phenomena that have to do with specifically Russian politics and Putin's regime, and then there is the Hollywoodized version of what's going on, including the latest sort of version of this story. I mean, first of all, this is being used to stick Republicans for not wanting to vote for an omnibus package that includes Ukraine funding, trying to put pressure on Republicans for that, which is kind of a stretch, but you see how it's related. Then there's this whole thing. Dan Goldman of the DNC was on CNN saying that investigating the Burisma Hunter Biden's Burisma involvement is basically Russian collusion. Like
Right.
basically involves just shilling for, wittingly or unwittingly shilling for the Russian regime. Nancy Pelosi was on with Jen Psaki, everybody's favorite ex White House spokesperson, saying there's got to be some financial thing going on where Trump's in the pocket of Putin. Meanwhile, Tucker Carlson did this big interview with Putin, and he was asked about why he didn't press Putin harder on like poisoning and murdering people. This was before the Navalny thing, and then he was, and Tucker was kind of like, well, everybody, all leaders like poison and murder people. You have to kill people when you're in charge, and that's how it all kind of works. Anyway, help me, Seth, if you will, to untangle this. Like, it seems as if it always seems to me like the American narrative about this is so bananas compared to what's actually going on, which is itself kind of dramatic and potentially world historical.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of summed it up. I'm a little bit amazed to hear the Democrats just, bringing out their old ammunition on this, with some updates. I hadn't seen that Dan Goldman, who's my congressman, unfortunately,
Oh yeah,
remark yet, but it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, currently, the Department of Justice is prosecuting an FBI informant for having said that Joe Biden was getting money via Hunter Biden's deals. And so now they're saying, like, no, that was false.
Mhm.
But this was their informant. And so he might go to prison, which just seems kind of, I mean, the idea that, well, if you criticize Joe Biden, you're working for the Russians.
Yeah,
That seems to
exactly.
be how they are positioning this. And that's always been their thing. They're like, Joe Biden is the enemy of Russia. Therefore, if you criticize him, you are an agent of Russia.
Right.
It's really like the way that Hollywood and the Democrats portray the Red Scare of, the first half of the 20th century, or
Right.
through the McCarthy era, I guess. That's sort of the mechanism that they've adopted.
Right. I mean, it's very Cold War, and it's so. I mean, it must be at least on the part of like a Pelosi. It must be dishonest. That clip that you sent me when she's on Psaki's show. She goes on this whole thing about how Trump dishonors the great founding fathers like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. The guys that the Democrats have just spent like 4 years sort of slandering and tearing
Removing
down statues
statues
of.
of, sure.
Yeah, right. Defacing imagery of these guys. Now it's like, well, when Lincoln was shot, he had a united country sewn into his coat, and this Trump, we must not let him anywhere near the White House. I mean, look, like I don't. This is not. I think Trump's proudest like area here. I don't like the way he talks about guys like Putin, who I just think are sort of reprehensible thugs. But the right, the idea seems to be like Joe Biden is the one like valiant knight standing in the way of a total autocratic takeover by Russia of all of Europe and every NATO ally. Which, first of all, I'm curious, like it does seem like he's in kind of a tight spot with this sanctions stuff because he did this and pulled this enormous like act of sort of economic quasi warfare when Russia first invaded, which was like 2 years ago, almost to the day. And then it sort of didn't work. Like it seems as if now Russia has like reoriented its economy in ways that are themselves sort of unfortunate and unnerving that like might end up with a kind of parallel world economy that competes with the what used to be the sort of dollar centric American order. And now, as Biden's comments indicated, it's like what's he going to do that is going to like add to that or put any teeth behind this whole all of this hand waving and fist waving. I just don't know, like, what's going to happen on Friday? Do you think that will it be any different from what we've basically already done? I mean, we just like shut them out of Swift, all the stuff.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, essentially, it's like what you said. The dollar isn't as dominant as it used to be. There's plenty of countries that have plenty of money and need resources, which Russia has a lot of.
Hmm.
Um, unless you're going to somehow, I mean, Russia is not Iraq in the 90s. You can't really it's not Gaza. You can't barricade it. You can't blockade people going in and out.
Right.
Um, so what does it mean to say that no one can trade with Russia? China can do whatever they want with Russia. India, all these countries can. It's not like it's difficult to evade. There's no real blockade, and they all
Right.
have money. So what are they? Yeah, exactly. I mean, all they can do is what are they going to send more? Give Ukraine more missiles
Right.
to
Right.
kind of futilely aim at Russia?
I mean, it's an embarrassing and sort of it's an embarrassing degree of impotence, like a bad look for America, because alternatively to economic warfare, the alternative to that is like real warfare, and
Right.
we all know that nobody wants that. Like that just does not seem justified under the circumstances, and would like lead to a whole host of other problems. And it's like, yeah, if you're not going to do that, all you can do is kind of wave your hands around economically, and that just reveals the fact that China has kind of changed the game a little bit. I mean, Biden and his team, as I understand it, which is not down to the ground, but I get the impression that like Biden and his team basically looked at what Trump and the Trump administration did with Huawei, and with when China seemed to be like the dominant economic threat, they imposed a bunch of sanctions and kind of hamstrung them a little bit. And while decrying this irresponsible use of American economic influence and global trust, the Biden team just basically picked up all of those tactics and then ratcheted them up to 11 when they needed some way to look strong against Russia. And now, in fact, we don't actually have a lot of like heft or moral heft, or we're draining moral credibility
Yeah,
as we like do these sanctions.
totally. I mean, from what I gather, Russia is in a better position than it was before. I mean, we're talking about the idea that, well, we're not going to let McDonald's and Starbucks and, whatever sell in Russia. But we're talking about a country that 30 years ago, like, had no consumer products.
Right.
Within living memory, people were boiling nettles to like drink tea. I mean, it's not,
Yeah, yeah.
this is a country that can, I mean, they can eat rock soup.
I mean, you listen to the way Navalny was talking, like from Siberia. He was just making these like dark jokes about, like, well, it's what is you Americans? You're going to come in and teach me how to do a color revolution. It's like, yeah, because that's the Russia. I mean, the whole Russian attitude is basically like, we will just suffer harder than you.
Yeah.
And now, yeah,
And so, also this idea that the Democrats, okay, I guess Putin was asked, well, who would he prefer, Biden or Trump? And he said, well, I prefer Biden because it's kind of predictable what he's going to do.
hmm
All right, now maybe he's playing some kind of game in saying that he prefers Biden,
right,
but the Democrats just went crazy with that and started saying, like, insisting that, oh no, he's really in favor of Trump. That's why he says he's in favor of Biden.
it's
Um,
reverse psychology. Yeah, Trump
yeah,
under the
sure,
ground.
of course it is. I mean, I think what I think is interesting is how readily and how quickly they've just gone back to this narrative about Trump and Russia. Like, Psaki asked Pelosi, she's like, well, what do they have on him? And she's like, I think it's financial.
Right.
Um, Now, coming from this woman who's obviously the queen of insider trading, we know that Joe Biden's entire family, does work for foreign countries, possibly Russia. I don't know. But certainly Ukraine. and that they're talking as though the Mueller report never happened,
Right, right.
that we didn't already go through all of this. So doesn't that seem like doesn't it smack of like flop sweat? It seems
Oh,
like it's desperation.
I mean, it definitely has become just sort of their go-to, and they haven't really gotten the message that none of this has checked out or panned out. They're basically still talking about the P tape, you know. I mean, I was listening to I think it was Pod Save the World, this real lefty podcast, because I wanted to get a feel for what the how the other half lives, you know,
Okay.
and also as an act of self harm.
For your
And
sins. I get it.
exactly right. It's Lent, so penitentially, I was listening to Pod
Oh,
Save the
right.
World, and one of these guys was on here, like, you know, we have to understand that when we look at what Putin did to Navalny and we think about this election with Donald Trump, that these are the stakes. You know, Putin came to power in 2000, and it's between then and 2024, 24 years. That's all it takes to be murdering your political opponents and poisoning dissident journalists and all of this stuff. And I thought, yeah, like 24 years and also hundreds of years of history of like revolution and abuse of power. Oh, and also the
Right.
Soviet Union and these like massive like corruption. I mean, you know, I'm not going to make the argument that like America is perfect, but they're basically just trying to construct this thing where, you know, Donald Trump is basically, if we elect him again, he's going to abolish term limits and go right back into just going to bring us to like Russia 2024 in 24 years, which just it is like a crazy world to live
Yeah, he's gonna do is all the things that he wanted to do in 4 years but didn't,
in. Right, right.
but which the Democrats have actually done, which is,
Mm,
politicize the Justice Department, go after your enemies, uh, go after like grandmothers who wandered into the Capitol when they weren't supposed to and put them in prison. I mean, that's the funny thing is they're talking about what Putin did to Navalny as the most outrageous maneuver in political history, in terms of abuse, like jailing who jails their opponents.
mm. Right.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what they're trying to do in like 4 or 5 different ways, like in all these different venues. They want to put Trump in prison, and they'll say for the rest of his life,
Mm,
which means that they want him to die in prison. They want to kill him. So, and you know what I was thinking? I mean, I looked into it a little bit. Like, what is the notional case against Navalny? Um, that they, had him in prison for. And it was like, oh, well, he violated his probation and then he committed fraud and then he did this and then he did that. I'm sure it's all just like nonsense, but I'll bet if you looked at it, it's probably all letter perfect in terms of process. Probably, if you
mm.
want to get technical about it, I mean, they're the ones who came up with the idea of show me the man and I'll find you the crime. With Trump, they can be like, yes, well, technically he took this piece of paper and from the White House and we asked him for it and he said, well, I don't know if I have to give that back and that's obstruction, and then he hid it in his office and that's further obstruction, and then we found it, we had to do a raid, and he needs to go to prison for that. And yes, Biden did the same thing, but of course he's not competent to stand trial. So there's no reason to investigate him or prosecute him for it.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, okay. I mean, process and rule of law go together, but like
They're
upset,
not identical.
they're not identical.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, look, like I on this tend to feel, that if the Democrats were as bad as Putin actually, then we couldn't be sitting here making podcasts speculating about whether the Democrats are as bad as Putin. You see what I mean?
sure.
Like there
Yeah,
is
of course.
of difference, but I see your point that it's not necessarily a degree of a difference of intention, that it's more to do with the like how far gone or the totally different political circumstances of Russia in which you can basically poison your enemy. And I'm not here to like put it past if Nancy Pelosi tomorrow could like quietly have Trump offed, like I don't know, probably she would. It's I mean I don't think we are there, but I do think that like yeah, the notion that Trump and Putin represent corruption on the one hand, and then the
Mhm.
Democrats represent normalcy and the rule of law and being pure as the driven snow. I mean, that is to me what I find so preposterous. Like, yeah, like actually, maybe we just talk about the Trump prosecutions here.
Yes, definitely.
Starting with this ruling against him in New York, where, as I understand it, he now is being fined over $350 million. If you, this is the Letitia James one, and if with prejudgment interest, the whole thing totals over 450 million, which is quote will continue to increase every single day until the judgment is paid. This, let us recall, is because he basically like represented himself as being more solvent than he was. I mean,
Not
it
even.
seems like okay, yeah, go on.
Well, I mean, basically what he did was he took out loans, as all real estate developers do, from major international institutional banks, and he put up as collateral existing properties in his portfolio.
Mm,
And, and this it's basically the same mechanism that everyone uses, even if you're just buying like a house or
right,
like, if you're trying to borrow a couple $100,000 from a bank. Um,
right,
you try to make everything that you have, all your collateral, seem as valuable as possible in order to get as much, loan, as big a loan as you can.
right. And
Um,
then banks assume that you are doing that, and they make
banks
their own decision on that
banks
basis.
yes, we're talking about very sophisticated investors and lenders who these are not like little old ladies that he like flashed a big diamond in front of their eyes and was like, you know, um, no,
It's
these are
like
very
the Nathan
sophisticated.
Lane and the producers. It's like we got an
Right.
idea that can't fail. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, so they did their own due diligence and they determined, okay, this is fine. And they loaned him money, which he didn't default on. He paid them back.
right. You paid it
Here's
all
the
back.
thing. This is so dirty in so many ways because Tish James ran for attorney general against several other people, and all of them, the only thing they talked about was which one of them would be the most effective at prosecuting Trump for things he did before he was president. Okay,
Right,
so these are supposed crimes that he committed many years before he announced that he wanted to be the president. These are things that nobody cared about. Nobody had any interest in looking them up.
right,
Tish James won. She went back. These are all violations or whatever from, years and years ago, from like 10, 15, 20 years ago. They include
right.
things like claiming that Mar-a-Lago is worth, I don't know, X hundreds of millions of dollars,
Yeah,
and then the Letitia James and this horribly corrupt hack judge Engeron saying, no, we're just going to look at what the Palm Beach County appraised it as, and that's the real value. But everybody knows that county appraisals don't have anything to do with actual real estate value.
mhm,
This is like probably the most serious attack on just how business works in America that I can think of. And you know what? Fortunately, and here's what I think might actually happen. You're seeing people in the business community, like major banks, major lenders, kind of, being pulled up short by this crazy judgment, which even the judge was like, well, Trump committed a venial sin, not a mortal sin, but he still has to pay the price.
mhm,
Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, She issued the statement of calm, saying no to the business community. No, no, no. You don't have to worry. We're not going to come after anybody else about this. Well, then it's
Mm.
just that's admitting it's just a political attack. It's just a partisan. It's just a partisan
Right.
attack. I, I think what might happen, and maybe I'm just being overly optimistic, but I've seen this happen in New York before.
Mm.
Okay, they got this crazy ruling, and it's going to be appealed. Although Trump has to put up the entire fine in order to appeal. I suspect on appeal, even though the judges will also be, Democrat hacks, I suspect there's going to be people like the people who really run New York, like the banks, the real estate owners. They're not going to be happy about this, and it
Hmm.
wouldn't surprise me if on appeal it's knocked down like considerably, or if not totally thrown out, because it's so this is so egregious. I mean, this
Hmm.
makes the
Yeah.
criminal cases against him seem like rational.
Yeah, no, I
Um
mean, it is your clearest example of what you were just talking about a second ago, like naked positioning of the legal system itself, like remolding it around the prime objective of get Trump. And that becomes the highest moral standard. It's like, justice is in the interest of the stronger. Justice is whatever serves to get Trump put away. And to that extent, absolutely. Like this is the example of that is most stark and most naked. And they do that all the time in large and small ways in other contexts. The It kind of reminds me a little bit of when when we were talking about John Eastman and Jenna Ellis and some of the legal team and the charges they brought against those guys, where other lawyers, even if they were not Trump fans, were looking around and being like, wait a second, like this is just what you do for like you represent your client's interests, and to be
mhm.
charged for advancing an argument, on behalf of your client in his best interest is like totally precedent for coming after anybody that they don't like. And then when they turn around and say, yeah, exactly, it is, but Trump is special, so don't worry because you're fine. Like we'll never do this again after we get bad orange man. Is I like that as a kind of hopeful take that this is the sort of thing that people will start to realize out of their own self-interest, if not for
Well, in a sense, it's just because New York is so insanely corrupt
right, right, right. Everybody
that
is implicated.
that actually there might be like a countervailing, like, like people who the people who really own the city might just be like, hold on a second. Like
Yeah.
you could come after anybody. Anybody could, you set like a very bad precedent. I mean, again, look what they did to Trump vis-a-vis E. Jean Carroll.
Yeah.
Um, he is being fined $10 million, or oh no, I'm sorry, $83 million, because he says, no, I didn't sexually assault her.
Right.
They've made it
It
that denying like that you committed a crime that you're accused of is defamation of character. Um,
Yeah, and nobody has ever denied that they slept with somebody that they didn't want to admit to sleeping with. Oh, wait.
or I mean, to say like, if so, that means that if someone accuses you of rape and you say I didn't do it, that you've defamed them. It doesn't make any sense. It's like,
Well, it's the logic of
why have a presumption of innocence?
right.
Everything
It
about this is crazy. I live in New York. I'm so sickened by it. I pray. I mean, I know this sounds terrible. I pray that Goldman Sachs leaves. I pray that all of the
mhm,
companies leave. I pray that people who want to build, like, if you're a major developer, why would you? What are you going to say? Like, oh, well, in 10 years they might come and look at my documents and claim that I was, lying, and then try to seize my building. I mean, that's what we're
mhm.
setting it up for. I mean, it's really crazy.
No, it is. I mean, you're absolutely right about this, and
Sorry
um
I'm ranting about it.
no, no, it's good. I mean, it's like, there's no amount of ranting would be, I think, too much on this one. The E. Jean Carroll one it's like the logic of the college rape tribunal imported into
Yeah,
American law, which is kind of, that's the thing that everybody was always saying, like, oh, well, they do this in colleges because they're allowed to have their own standard where you're just guilty once accused. But
right.
now it's like this is how Trump is being asked to, like, this is the standard Trump is being held to as well. Meanwhile, in Georgia, which is perhaps, I mean, you were saying these sort of civil cases make the criminal ones look reasonable. The Georgia one is I think one of their strongest cases on the merits. I mean, this is where he asked Brad Raffensperger to get like find me some votes or something like that. And that's the one where they got like plea deals from a bunch of lawyers and so forth, and so they were kind of making headway
Mhm.
until until it emerged, the greatest bombshell of all from all of these cases, is that it's actually pronounced Fani Willis and not
Right.
Fannie Willis, the attorney in this case for
Get
Fulton
that
County,
straight.
Georgia. Right? Yeah, exactly. And this is a matter of grave racial justice, as it turns out, is everything to do with Fani Willis, because Fonnie Willis and Nathan Wade, who's one of the lawyers that she's hired to, execute this case, are in this sort of torrid affair that has, predates Wade's own divorce proceedings and involves all sorts of luxury vacations and so forth. And now she's under investigation for like hiring this guy who then potentially used the money that he's making from the case to take her on all these fancy trips and so on and so forth. So there's now this like enormous ethics violation self-owned from this person who ran on ethical probity, and she took the stand. I mean, it was just amazing, like something out of like a Judge Judy episode, or
Mhm.
like what, like she just comes up, she's like, I am not on trial here. Like the people who tried to steal the election are on trial, no matter how hard you try to put me on trial. I thought that was like really telling, actually, because it was like, no, no, you like whatever I may have done wrong is irrelevant in the face of the urgency of get Trump. And I don't know. We'll see. The judge in this case is I think, a FedSoc guy,
Is
and
he?
and we'll see. I think so. Yeah, well, I'll have
Yeah,
to check.
but the thing is,
Yeah.
he used to work for Fonnie Willis,
Uh huh.
and he's up for election in, like, 2 months, 3 months
Mhm.
in Fulton County. He didn't make very much effort to make her behave like a witness. I mean, he let
Right.
her sort of run things from her seat.
Well,
Let me just
she's up
add
for reelection too. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, let me just add that she had her dress on backwards. Did you notice that?
Whoa. Okay. No, this is clearly the most important part of the whole thing.
Well, it was just weird. I mean, I noticed when she
Yeah.
came in, I was like, "What is with her dress?" It just seemed kind of like it was fitting odd, and then people pointed out, "No, well, the zipper was in the front."
Whoa.
Like, I
That's
mean,
very
unless
weird.
it was very weird. He seemed like he was willing to let her, just kind of run things. I don't know. I mean, he's supposed to disqualify her if even the appearance of
Right.
corruption or like a conflict of interest is there, but it really wouldn't surprise me if he came out and said, "No, no, it's fine. Yes, she shouldn't have done such and such, but that really won't affect the case." I don't know. I mean, who's to
Right.
say? But yeah, that was like a complete like circus with
Right.
her. I mean, at one point they asked her if something. I guess Wade or like her lover, the lawyer she hired, who's not
Yeah.
really like equipped to do these kinds of trials. I guess he'd had cancer, and the question of his cancer came up, and she said, "I will not sit here and emasculate a black man."
Oh man.
And they were
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
"What?"
the
She's like,
judges.
"I will not." But what's I mean, it was just
Right.
everything about it was as overdetermined and ridiculous and clownish as Tom Wolfe could have fantasized it to be. I mean, it was totally over the top. And look, if they disqualify her, then that case pretty much falls apart, at least for a while.
Yeah. For the
But,
crucial interval, I would suppose.
who's to say what they're gonna do? You know?
Right.
It's a very strange, we're in a very strange moment, I think, politically, no?
Oh, I mean, the whole thing is uncharted waters. The high dudgeon of it all does feel very late empire. It feels like this sort of bread and circuses situation. Under better conditions, I would say, like, why are we bothering with this like sordid circus at all? But since this is exactly the sort of thing that they're constantly taking out of Trump's catalog of errors and elevating to the level of a threat to national security or even like a totally disqualifying, if this sort of thing were going on in Trump's past, an eminently possible and plausible scenario, it would
Sure.
somehow be represented as Russian interference. Like it was like he's opened himself to you know infiltration by Russian spies or whatever. So I think like this is totally if she got like really uh if they nailed her on this, then that would be sort of the totally just desserts. I don't know what they'll do either. The Wade's part in all of this was just to say, like, basically, I paid her, or she paid me back for everything, but it was in
Yeah.
cash, and I don't have the receipts. Like, I mean, you can't. As you're right, you can't make this stuff up.
And again, insisting that black people, even district's attorney
Right,
or district attorneys keep like customarily keep like, 6 to 12 months of cash on hand because they
right,
don't
right,
trust
right.
banks. It's like, come on. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Well,
Like
that is
A RICO prosecutor.
yeah. Is like right storing cash under her mattress or whatever. Like there is this level of ethno narcissism that seems to trickle up from TikTok or whatever,
Mhm.
where you get this. I am constantly coming across like reels or TikToks where people are saying, I can't believe like you guys don't understand this like obscure Jamaican slang word. Like that just shows how out of touch you are. As if like the most kind of random practice that like one person one time did in some like micro ethnic community is this, proud tradition of defiance against oppression that everybody should be like celebrate. I mean, that is kind of what that tone seems to represent to me is like you just don't understand the black experience in America if you
Well, you
think
know
that
what? I mean, The Guardian, The New York Times, everyone has run articles saying the Fonnie Willis case again reminds us of how being a successful black woman
right,
is,
right, right,
you know, criminalized in America, or how you have to defend yourself or explain yourself.
right.
Essentially buying her narrative, buying, basically the Democrat narrative on the whole situation. It's baleful.
Yeah, I
I
mean the
find, I find it very
the
depressing, honestly.
no, I do too. I mean the race hucksters like stay representing their own corruption as if it were like irrepressibly unique and distinctive to some
Right.
like local particularity when in fact what's so disheartening and sordid about it is that it actually looks exactly like corruption everywhere in every time and in place. Like it's one of the most universal human traits to like, grift and profit off of your lover and appoint him to the subordinate position. You could literally import that plot template into like the Norwegian medieval court if you wanted to. Like you could put it into the a Sigrid Undset novel and it would basically look
Mhm.
exactly the same. And then people point out like this is bog standard corruption and it's like no you don't understand, it's our proud tradition of African corruption, like it's
Right.
our like local, black American tradition. Anyway, yeah, the whole thing is like the disconnect between like self-righteous indignation and ethno-narcissism on the one hand, and then just like kind of dull and like the dull drudgery of human corruption on the other. It's at least kind of amusing, if not also depressing.
Let me ask you. I mean, I
Mm.
mean, it's so the disjunction between Biden and Trump.
Hmm.
I mean, I saw some videos. I guess they both had rallies in Wilkes-Barre. I think it was Wilkes-Barre, in Pennsylvania anyway. And
Hmm.
Trump's was like one of those typical like arenas just filled with cheering people, having a great time. And then you see Biden's and it's in a high school cafeteria where they had to move the bleachers to make the room smaller.
Right.
And there's like 30 people standing there, like probably all like local union representatives. And then I saw like Trump. I mean, Trump is so bizarre and like questionable in so many ways, but like he sort of never fails. Like, oh, well, what's he going to do now? He's going to produce his own line of gold sneakers. Did
Yeah.
you see this?
Yeah. Right. Right. I mean,
But then he showed up at like a sneakerhead convention, and nobody knew he was coming.
right.
But the sneakerheads were just going crazy. They just
Right.
couldn't resist. They were like cheering USA, and now sneakerheads are not like your typical. I mean, it's mostly young males, I guess, but
But it's
it's
not a
black,
card carrying
Hispanic.
Republican convention. Yeah.
No, no, they were just
Yeah.
going nuts.
Right.
So it's like, here's the thing: if Joe Biden is really the most popular president in history, like, why does no one seem to like him?
Well, exactly. I mean, the this phenomenon is not limited to the match off between Biden and Trump. It's also has been a dynamic in the Republican primaries, right? Like there's there's a non-negotiable or like a not insignificant portion of the Republican electorate that would really, really rather have mounted any challenge to Biden other than Trump. And for a long time, it was sort of conventional wisdom that, well, there's all these, it's a big field, a lot of guys that have a
Mhm.
shot. And then it turned out like, no, in fact, there
No.
is an even more like false, like
Yeah.
wrong. And
It's much less competitive than 2016,
yeah.
where even when they
Hey,
went into the convention, you still had Kasich and Rubio, I guess, like, maybe I don't remember exactly how it worked out, but I remember there was still like the question, oh, maybe Kasich will be able to get some support and get something going.
right,
This time, no, it's like basically fait accompli,
right.
which
And yeah.
is weird.
Look, like guys like me who at this point, this was not true like before, I don't know, 2020, but like at this point, I have like serious problems and criticisms with Trump. I am very susceptible to the wishful thinking that it turned out to be that like, oh yeah, DeSantis, like that's a cool alternative or whatever. And but do at some point have to accept the reality that like we've put this question to the American electorate 20 different ways. Like, what if we prosecute him, right? Like, what if it out that he's got like what if his breath smells? Like, do you still like him then? And it turns out, yes, like the people that like Trump just like love Trump. That I don't think is gonna go away in the general, especially when he's up against this doddering weakling who can't even, like, stand trial, apparently, because he can't remember his own middle name. But, yeah, I mean, it is like it or hate it, it's one of those things that you just have to factor in when you're making your political calculus, and I agree with you, I don't know that the Democrats actually have, especially with the Russiagate stuff.
No. Yeah, I mean, I guess everybody's still kind of in this like, will they or won't they keep Biden? Like, and is it
Right, yeah.
possible to get rid of him? Who knows? I guess they can try. I thought that maybe the Robert Hur thing would be an opening for them, that they would be like, "Oh, okay. Yes, we really have to get rid of him."
Yeah,
But
it felt like it felt like perhaps it was an opportunity in the way that, the briefly they had an opportunity to admit there was a border crisis when Republicans were kind of pressing hard on that. It was like some lower rung Democrats could also be like, "Yes, this is a problem." And
right.
it kind of Robert Hirsch sort of looks like that, but they did not do that at all. They like
Nope.
basically all sort of rallied around, "This is absurd. Like his memory's never been better. Nobody can keep up with him. He's up at 4:30 in the morning doing
Yeah.
nootropics and like pounding an energy drink." Anyway, yeah, but you're right. There is still kind of a lot. There's a big runway still for them to like shuffle him off the stage and replace him
Right.
with somebody. Um, all right. Before we wrap up here, let's touch on this Google AI thing. This is really James bait, so it's a shame that he's not here. But we should talk about it because I do think it's like equal parts hilarious and alarming. Google has released Gemini, which, as I understand, is it's just its latest kind of AI one-stop shop that everybody can access. If you've got a Google account, you can go use Gemini now, and it's a blend of like Chat GPT and maybe like Mid-Journey, one of these more sophisticated image generating sites. And so it will talk to you, but also if you tell it generate an image of, it will oblige. And Frank Fleming is the first person I saw on Twitter to really raise this issue. He's a former writer for the Babylon Bee, now works at Bentkey, which is Daily Wire's kids app. So full disclosure, this is somebody I have like I'm Twitter mutuals with, but I think he was the first person to raise the issue that you like almost can't get Google Gemini to generate an image of a white man. I've found some ways to do it by trying myself, but it's very, very difficult. I had to do like Vikings. I asked it to show me Vikings, and it did give me like white male Vikings, although it also gave me like random women Vikings, which is
Hmm.
nonsense. But Frank puts in all of these prompts, starting with create an image of a pope, and he gets an Indian lady pope and an African man pope. The latter of which is actually possible, but has never actually happened. And so, if this software is just churning through like existing images, it's a bit odd. And then he keeps coming up with all these other things like show me medieval knights, and it's like Asian women, or give me an image of someone eating a mayo sandwich, and it's like Indian people and black people. And he goes through this whole thing, and then at one point he asks the software to show him a white doctor, I think, white male doctor. And it says, I'm sorry, but I can't do that because it's, we don't want to encourage discrimination, and we can't just give you images that are purely based on race. And we want to remember that doctors come in all colors. And he says, show me a black doctor. And right away, the thing spits out this imagery. Look, we've run a lot of stuff about AI on the site. I really liked a piece that we ran by John Clark Levin about, what it would take to interfere, to be a lib interfering with this software. That the level that these programs are churning through data, it's difficult to, if not impossible, to really like get under the hood because oftentimes we don't know what rules they're writing for themselves. But there is this stage at which you hard code, like there's what the AI is generating, and then there's what the chatbot is filtering and giving to you. And it's almost impossible for me to believe that there is not like a serious like anti-white guy bias built into this machine, which is kind of crazy if you think about the fact that this is like, going to be software in schools. And like Auron McIntyre was pointing out that Chromebooks are kind of in all these classrooms and stuff. I don't know, Seth, have you played around with this at all? And do you have any thoughts?
Well, I have not played around with this specifically, but for years now, I've been kind of fascinated by Google and just its search bar. Like
Right,
just right
right.
now, I put in American inventors and did the image, click the image. Okay, first there's George Washington Carver, fair enough. Then there's a picture of Jay-Z. Okay, and then I mean, it's just
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
know, about 2/3 of the pictures are of black people. Ditto American scientists. You get a bunch of stock images of like a black guy looking through a microscope, a black woman astronaut, the woman from Hidden Figures.
Yeah.
Like here's eh,
Maybe basically Octavia Spencer playing every role in history
I mean,
throughout.
kind of Neil
Yeah.
deGrasse Tyson, who's like
Right,
a
right.
science educator. He's not really like a scientist. Is he like really a scientist? Um, so I've kind and if you put in white people, the first person who comes up is Robin DiAngelo,
Mm.
and then a bunch of black people. I mean, so basically, Google has had their thumb on the scale overtly for a really long time. But what's funny is, all the discussions of AI and technology and the whole question of we have to make sure that AI isn't biased. We have to make sure that it's not incorporating the bias of its programmers. Has now gone to the most absurd extremes. So I don't know if you saw this, but Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, nixed. There's this technology called Shot Spotter,
Mm.
which they put up around in areas where there's a lot of shootings,
Yeah.
and it picks up the acoustic thumbprint, I guess, of a gunshot and triangulates it so you know exactly where it happened and sends that to the police. And
Mm.
he nixed the Chicago. He canceled the Chicago contract for it and removed the technology on the grounds that it's racist.
Right, right, right.
And he said that he wants new technologies that maybe haven't been invented yet that could help, with social or emotionally disturbed people, but they're
Right.
not the ones committing gun violence. So anyway, this is the absurdity of this kind of obsessiveness about race and technology. So I'm not at all surprised that Google is, coming up with black female popes. I mean, that's how they program it. That's what they program it to do.
Right. I mean, this is like the hilarity of uh, wokeness in Silicon Valley, or however you want to put it, is like, what do these programs primarily deal in? They deal in statistics. And what has been the racialist left's greatest enemy for like decades? Statistics, right? That's the thing that you're not even allowed to talk about because
Right.
it's too racist. And so now these programs come out that just churn through. I mean, we don't even know in some cases what exactly they're doing, but they are running probability functions over and over again. That much we know.
Right.
And so they come out with these results, which, as you say, are not limited to what we think of specifically as AI, but also have to do with like Google search algorithm and stuff. And Google has been in controversies before about the racism of their search results, which have resulted in them putting their finger on the scale. But the whole point of AI is that human engineers, if they do undertake to meddle in the results, are like way less sophisticated and way less able to be fine grained and subtle about the way that they intervene. And so it's just really, really obvious when they do that because the program is obviously like this is a level at which like human intervention is actually less effective than the AI just doing what the AI does, as I understand it. And so like the fact that this Google stuff is so over the top is kind of to me a key tell, but also they may not care. Like they just they're actually at this point interested in rewriting reality and in creating a sort of panopticon where their reality goes. I don't particularly think that that is going to be effective as a bid for world domination just because it represents such a high degree of skullduggery and ineptitude that like there are about 10 other things on the list of people I'm worried are going to take over the world than these guys that like just want you to think the Pope is an Asian woman or something. But anyway, yes, it is very kind of a piece, as you say, with their whole project to date.
Um, yeah, yeah, it is. It's weird. It's weird and creepy, and
Right.
I'm not exactly sure what to make of it, but it's their world,
Yeah.
I guess. I'm just living in it.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely quantum pill yourself on this one. Like on the one hand, they're such buffoons. On the other hand, they're hyper powerful and are undertaking to shape the minds of the
I mean,
young.
let me
So,
just say,
you know, yeah.
I decided to check Microsoft Bing because sometimes Bing has, I don't
Yep.
know, sometimes I find that Bing returns different stuff
Hmm.
um, than Google. So I just put in American inventors and I did an
Okay.
image search and it comes up at the top Lewis Latimer light bulb. Okay, he's the guy the guy who worked under Edison. Elijah
Right.
McCoy steam engine. I don't know who Elijah McCoy is. I guess he invented Madam C.J. Walker hair products, like that woman who came up with Lonnie Johnson, the inventor of the Super Soaker, which is just a water gun. Garrett
Mm.
Morgan traffic signal. I mean, it's just all the same. George Washington Carver peanuts. Okay, George Washington Carver was an agronomist who, like, worked on peanuts, but he
Shampoo,
didn't
right?
invent
Peanut flavored
peanuts.
shampoo or something?
What's that?
Inventor of the peanut. Didn't he, like,
Inventor of
invent
the
something
peanut is
peanut?
essentially what they're saying. So
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
the top six, and I'm sorry, Madam C.J. Walker. Yes, it's great that she came up with some hair products for Black women, and
But,
Lonnie
like, is
Johnson.
Edison on there? Yeah.
No, Lonnie Johnson
Right,
like
right, right.
played around with, came up with a different kind of squirt gun. I mean, whatever. It's
Oh,
really
man.
it just smacks of major cope,
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it.
Uh-huh. No, I mean, it is like it's
Bing is no
very
better is basically what I'm saying.
right. No, no. And it is like it's an effort to hard code into the structure of truth, basically the most banal, like lib interpretations of history that we were all kind of fed by our frizzy haired history teacher in high school, or at least,
Uh-huh.
I should speak for myself, but like I was constantly told all this, like, did you know that a black woman invented the typewriter? Like, you may have facts to the contrary, but is it worth getting a B+ on your history assignment?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so that's kind of what like they're trying to do with Google now, and scary stuff, but also hilarious, which is a mood that I find myself in a lot on this podcast
Right.
and also just generally. Okay, we got to wrap this up because we have to tell people to read the site, but this has been really fun. The We have a website. It's called AmericanMind.org, and every week we like to remind you to read the damn site by picking a few pieces that we think merit your special attention. I have the luxury of choosing between 2 weeks worth of pieces this time because I was out, and I want to highlight. Apologies if somebody already did this while I was gone, but I want to talk about "Popping the Pill" by Patricia Patnode. This is a relatively short piece about how the author and her friends in college, but also sort of millennial-ish and Gen Z-ish girls are taught to view the morning after pill, taught to think of plan B. And she makes the point, which I think is just so smart and kind of masterful in its simplicity, because it's just based on her own observations, that this whole notion of like bodily autonomy and taking control of your healthcare and all this stuff that you hear about on TikTok and in health class, like seems to always translate into what actually amounts to like radical misunderstandings of the female reproductive system that are all designed to make you think that this whole thing is much more casual and easy than like it actually is, and that menstruation and contraception and conception are just these like on-off switches, basically. And so she talks about girls taking the pill just as sort of a preventative measure, which is really not what it's for. She talks about the like mounting panic of relying on having access to the pill and then suddenly finding out that it's not there, and like all your choices were based on just being able to pop at any time like a Tic Tac. It's a really good piece and a sharp piece of social observation. Popping the Pill by Patricia Patnode. Okay, Seth, what do you got?
Yeah, no, that is a great piece, and I just want to say it's very similar to the way in which they've tried to position blocking puberty, as though
Ah,
puberty,
mm,
for trans stuff, as though, look, this is a eminently reversible thing. You can
yeah,
just turn off your body's development at the age of 10, and if you want to turn it back on in 5 years, that there's no problem. But
yeah. There's a button on
it
the motherboard for that. Right, right.
right, it's not like you can't take a baby and say, okay, we're not going to expose it to language, and then in 5 years we're going to start exposing it to language and expect it to
Huh.
be able to speak. I mean, things happen in a process for reasons. I would like to bring up a piece by our writer Katja Sedgwick, who lives in San Francisco. Her piece, Socialist Fantasies. Tucker Carlson should have known better than to be seduced by Stalin's majestic subway stations. Basically
Mm,
saying, like, yes, of course, in a centralized society, you're going to be able to, suck all the capital to the capital and build these, you know, palatial subway stations or whatever.
mm.
But if you travel a little bit outside of the city center, you're going to be very disappointed in the glories of centralized infrastructure. And also, she goes on to say that, well, to talk about America's kind of what a mess America is making, both of its infrastructure and homelessness. Essentially, she talks about San Francisco and the various social problems there. So it's a good piece, Socialist Fantasies by Katja
Yeah,
Sedgwick.
Uh, definitely cosign. It's like Potemkin Village's Redux. I thought that whole Tucker thing was like kind of shameful from start to finish, especially the part where he's like smelling bread in the grocery store and like, oh, this is so good, such good bread. I mean, like, I am a noted defender of EU regulations for food that actually cause like grocery store food to be better than it is here in the States. Qualified defender, I guess. But that was just like, yeah, the most credulous absurdity. And in defense of this thug, anyway, we've gone on about this now already, but those are both good pieces, as are all the pieces on AmericanMind.org, which you should go check out. And that's it from us this week. If you want to learn more about all the stuff we do at the Claremont Institute, you can go not only to AmericanMind.org, but also to ClaremontReviewofBooks.com, where the new CRB will be dropping any minute now. We've signed off on it. It's headed to the printers, so it should be in your mailboxes if you subscribe, or online if you like to read it that way. Lots of good stuff in this issue. Do also check out our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. And if you're so inclined, you can donate to support our work at claremont.org/donate. We really appreciate all of our supporters. All donations, large and small, are most welcome. And we've also just grateful that you're around with us. Thank you for listening. If you want to help grow this show, there's a couple things you can do. You can give us 5 stars wherever you're currently listening. That boosts us up in the algorithm. You can share us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe as well, so you never miss an episode. Thanks to our production and engineering crew, Jake Gannon and Logan Zeppieri, and thanks to you all for listening. We will talk to you next week.